this time.
Oh, someone says hello. Carol's here from Denver, Colorado, even before we're live. Hi, Carol. You're on Zoom, I guess. So that's great. There's Jenny.
Oh, hey, Jenny.
How's that for
Hi,
timing?
how are you?
Good, good, good. Good
Yeah,
timing.
good to see you. It's been a while.
Yes.
We are live.
Oh, we're live.
Okay, we're live. We're live. Hello, hello. It's 4 o'clock Pacific, 6 o'clock Central, with same time here in Costa Rica, 7 o'clock on the East Coast, midnight in Dublin, 1 a.m. in London, Milan, and most of Europe. 5:30 a.m. Wednesday morning in New Delhi, 10 a.m. Wednesday morning in Brisbane, Australia, and 1 p.m. in Auckland, New Zealand, and it's Facebook Live. Hello, everyone. Tell us where you're from, what time it is where you are. I mean, it's just great to see people from all over the world here, so thank you so much. Tonight, our special guest is Jenny Finke, who is our partner in putting together the gluten-free masterclass, and tonight is all about going gluten-free, answering your questions. And for those who are here live tonight, it is 2 days after Christmas. And for those of you who will be watching this in 6 months, you'll just get some information for next Christmas if we're talking about Christmas recipes. So welcome and hello. Big shout out to the Quincy family in Iowa, watches every week, and little Gracie, who I believe is 11 years old. I never get that right, Gracie. Type in and tell us what your age is now, okay? And so, hello, Jenny. Nice to see you.
Good to see you too. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, of course, of course. Now, so we're just going to get started right away. As people are typing in their questions, and Anne will put the link here for the questions. But a common question comes up: I don't have celiac disease. Do I need to go gluten-free? And I just want to begin with that because it's so very important. Many of our doctors who have been out in the field for 10 years, 20 years, they were taught that if you have a problem with wheat, it manifests as celiac disease. That's actually not true. That's a historic misconception. We all learned about the potential dangers of wheat through learning about celiac disease. So that was the first one that we all learned about. But now we know, depending on your genetics, which determines where the weak link is in your chain, you pull at a chain, it breaks at the weakest link. Wheat sensitivity, when you have a wheat sensitivity, it's the pull on the chain. And if you have the genes, the weak gene, you may get celiac disease. Or if you have a different gene, you may get Hashimoto's thyroid, or you may get rheumatoid arthritis, or you may get multiple sclerosis. Just Google the disease you're thinking about, rheumatoid arthritis and gluten. Just Google it. Here come the studies that sometimes rheumatoid arthritics who do not have celiac disease, when they go on a gluten-free diet, they get better. Sometimes, not always, but sometimes. So our doctors learned that wheat is associated with celiac, and that's true. And if you don't have celiac, you don't have a problem with wheat. That is not true at all. And so the understanding has expanded so much in the last number of years, and the science is very clear on that entire topic. Jenny, anything you'd like to add to that first question about if I don't have celiac disease, do I have a problem with wheat?
Right. Oh, well, I mean, it's a huge, huge question. I get it all the time because I do have celiac disease, but I feel like I work with this community of people who have all sorts of disorders with gluten, not just celiac. And I think people need to understand that having an issue with gluten or wheat is well beyond celiac at this point. And just because not the data isn't as prolific as the data for celiac disease is, it doesn't mean it's not a real disorder. Just the lack of the research that we're seeing doesn't mean lack of disorder. It's not in 18 million people's head that they have an issue with gluten. I'm just anxious to see some of the research catch up. We're seeing that research, but not enough of it to help people realize this is a very real disorder.
Yeah. Well, that's a common understanding that there's not enough research, and I would personally take issue with that. That there are many studies on the topic, nowhere near as many as with celiac disease. I mean, it's unquestionable. You have a problem with gluten and you got celiac disease, you get gluten out of your diet. That is critically important. And what people will learn in the course we're going to teach is that gluten-free diet is not the treatment for celiac disease. Gluten-free diet is the prerequisite to the treatment for celiac disease. Of course, you have to go gluten-free, but that's just the beginning because so many people don't do well on a gluten-free diet. And our goal is to make sure that doesn't happen anymore so that people understand how to do it correctly. And I'm going to share a screen for a minute to show you just one study, in my geek little way. There are many that I could show you, but I'm just going to show you this one. And I'm going to put it on full screen so that everyone can see it once I get that thing out of the way. And here we go. So this is from Professor Yehuda Schoenfeld, who is the godfather of celiac, of autoimmune conditions. To give you a sense of this guy, 28 of the PhDs in immunology who received their PhD from Tel Aviv University in Israel, his department. There are many more, but 28 of them chair departments of immunology in hospitals and medical schools around the world. They're the very best, and they all are his students. So Yehuda Schoenfeld is the godfather. And they published a study earlier this year, in March of this year. And look at the title of the study. Gluten-free diet can ameliorate the symptoms of non-celiac autoimmune diseases, not just celiac disease. And this is from the godfather of it all. And what he showed, they looked at a number of studies, and they found that 65% of the patients with autoimmune diseases got better on a gluten-free diet. And this was confirmed in 79% of the studies. They look at all the studies, and studies can say whatever you want them to say. Often that's the case. But the consistent message across the board in the majority of studies that look at this topic of gluten-free outside of celiac disease, consistently, 79% of the time, the studies say, yeah, people can get better on a gluten-free diet. They may. If you have a problem with gluten, you have to get gluten out. And the three most common autoimmune diseases were psoriasis, autoimmune thyroid disease, and inflammatory bowel disease. Those were the three most common. Thyroid disease was the most responsive, highest percentage improvement of all, is if you have autoimmune thyroid disease. And this is a drawing they did, and you can't tell what that drawing is. So I went ahead and I just showed you what each of the orange boxes are. Addison's is an autoimmune disease of the adrenal glands, autoimmune hepatitis of the liver, autoimmune pancreatitis, autoimmune thyroiditis, autoimmune myocarditis, antiphospholipid syndrome, that causes miscarriages, amenorrhea, autoimmune enteropathies. The list goes on and on and on of the autoimmune diseases outside of celiac disease that may get better on a gluten-free diet. So the question that I asked to all of our doctors, when you diagnose a patient with an autoimmune disease of any type, when would you not test to see if they have a sensitivity to gluten? It's not that every one of them needs to go gluten-free. You just have to test. You just have to check, because 79% of the time in autoimmune diseases, they get better on a gluten-free diet. So you just have to check. And making that concept understood to our practitioners is more difficult than I thought it would be, because they have a way of thinking, and what we're asking of them is a paradigm shift to change the way you think. Just look at some of the science, look at this study and this study and this study, so that you just want to check to see. Jenny, anything you want to add to that concept of autoimmune diseases outside of celiac?
Yeah, well, I think that research, and you showed me that research, and it's one of the most powerful pieces of research that we have that shows how the gluten-free diet can help so many autoimmune diseases. But my thought and question maybe to you, just as a professional in this industry, you're like in the thick of it. Why do you think so many doctors are hesitant to test?
They're hesitant to test because there's a few reasons. One, they don't understand the importance of it. That's the main one, I think, is they don't understand how important it is to test. Two, they have to be able to think with some confidence why they're doing that test in order for insurance to pay for it. Mm. And three, they have to be able to speak with confidence, to look the patient in the eye and say, no, this really might be the problem. I mean, it's just worth checking, because 79% of the time in autoimmune diseases, people get better on a gluten-free diet. And so they have to have the confidence for themselves. And that's a really good question, because I say this on stage all the time. Every single doctor needs to do the test on themselves. And when they do the wheat Zoomer on themselves, they're startled often by the results. Wow, I didn't know I have a problem with wheat. I feel fine when I eat wheat. Then they start to understand, when we talk about it doesn't matter how you feel when you eat wheat. People think that if you eat a pizza, if you eat a sandwich and you feel okay, there's no stomach pain, then the food's not a problem. Well, that's because they think you have to have a problem in your stomach when you eat something. Now, the ratio, when you look at the science, the ratio is 8-to-1. For every one person that gets stomach complaints when they eat wheat, there are 8 people that don't. They get thyroid complaints, or they get brain fog, or they get joint symptoms the next morning when they wake up, and they don't associate it with what they ate yesterday. They don't associate their brain fog with what they ate previously. So if it hurts, if you hurt when you eat it within an hour of eating it, that's an easy one. That's a no-brainer. And so that's easy. So doctors don't quite get this yet. That's why I encourage every single one of them to do the test for themselves. And hopefully they come back and it's a problem. And then they'll be motivated to learn more about it for themselves. We have some questions, of course, that have come in. Let's start with the first one. Do you know if anything can be done about macular degeneration? And it's from Jane on Zoom. Hi, Jane. And yes, the answer is yes. Let me give you the information this way, if I may, that the Center for Disease Control tells us that 14 of the 15 top causes of death in the world today are chronic inflammatory diseases. 14 of 15. The only one that's not is accidental injuries, like an accident or something, unintentional injuries. Everything else, when you go down, it's going to be from a chronic inflammatory disease. And macular degeneration is a chronic inflammatory disease. Diabetes, Hashimoto's thyroid, psoriasis, Alzheimer's, brain fog, it doesn't matter. They're all chronic inflammatory diseases. So anytime you've received a diagnosis of a dis-ease, a disease, the first thing you have to understand, now the first thing we've all been trained to think is, what do I take to get rid of it? Right? Well, that's not going to happen with macular degeneration. That's not going to happen with rheumatoid. That's not going to happen with MS. That's not going to happen with Hashimoto's. You aren't going to take anything to get rid of it. They can give you some pharmaceuticals that will help with the pain and discomfort, maybe, but the process continues. So if you want to stop and reverse the process, and that's what our experts refer to as arresting the development of autoimmune disease. That's the language the science says is arresting the development of autoimmune diseases. Then you have to deal with, where is the autoimmune disease coming from? Where is the macular degeneration coming from? And when you begin to investigate for yourself, now inflammation means your cells are on fire. What cells? Well, the cells that you're genetically, there's two things that determine what disease you get. One is your genetics, and the second are the antecedents. That's a geek word that means how you live your life. If you eat tuna fish 3 times a week, every week, you likely have mercury poisoning. And you're going to have to deal with mercury as the trigger for inflammation, because almost all the tuna fish is high in mercury. And so you have to look to the history. How am I throwing gasoline on the fire? That's true with macular degeneration. That's true with rheumatoid. That's true with MS. That's true with chronic fatigue. That's true with Lyme disease. You have to identify, how am I creating this inflammation in my body? And when you begin investigating, it's an overwhelming task to investigate, because there's so many triggers that you learn about that may be setting you up for that. So it's overwhelming, and you just have to have patience and look and see. For example, if you Google gluten and macular degeneration, you'll see a few studies that show that gluten may be the trigger, throwing gasoline on the fire, pulling on the chain that's breaking at the weak link of your eyes and the function of your eyes. Maybe it's gluten, maybe. So you just have to check and see. So the answer to the question, can anything be done for macular degeneration, is absolutely yes. And we've had patients that, I've got testimonials of, I'm 80 some years old. I don't remember her exact age, but I went back for my driver's license because I can see again. Or another testimonial from an elder person, I can see the television again. Thank you so much. I'm enjoying, seeing my favorite shows again. So yes, you can address macular degeneration and most any other chronic inflammatory disease. There's no magic pill that's going to do it. There's no magic diet. There certainly can be a very beneficial diet, your selection of foods. Like if you have elevated antibodies to wheat, you do the test called the wheat zoomer. If it comes back positive, then absolutely you get wheat out of there as a component of dealing with macular degeneration. You can't be eating foods that are causing inflammation in your body and expect to be able to reduce a chronic inflammatory disease. Jenny, anything you want to add to that one?
No, I think that's very well said. I mean, we have to look to food to reduce inflammation. And when we reduce the inflammation in our body, we're always surprised at how our symptoms, dissipate or go away. And so, I mean, there's no harm in looking to food to help yourself. It's amazing.
Right. Exactly right. Next question comes from Jill on Facebook. When I call a restaurant to ask if they have gluten-free options, they say yes and list many options. But when I get there and ask if they use a separate grill, they say no. They cook everything together. So is it really gluten-free? I take your gluten enzymes everywhere. Jenny, you want to start with that one?
Yeah, I mean, it's scary to eat out and, trust someone to make that food for you. If that grill is being used to prepare food that contains gluten, it's definitely going to contaminate your food as well. So, I don't think that you should order something that is grilled, or you can discuss with them potentially, putting a piece of foil down. Sorry, my dog is making an appearance on Facebook Live tonight. But they could put foil down on the grill. But I think that really, if you eat out, you need to have those kind of conversations. Is this grill being used to cook gluten-free foods? Is this toaster, is this waffle iron being used to cook gluten and gluten-free foods? Things like that. And I would avoid eating on them. I don't think that risk is worth it. I think it's better to order something that is safe, that is prepared in a clean pan on a clean surface. That's my opinion. I know some people, I think she said she takes digestive enzymes, and I think digestive enzymes should be used as sort of that insurance policy, like in case I get gluten, but not as, permission to eat gluten, I guess you could say.
Right. There are some people that say, well, doc, if these enzymes are so good, can I just eat regular pizza and take the enzymes? And the answer is always no. No, it's for inadvertent exposures, and it works really well. And I see that we've posted the link for Wheat Rescue already there so that people can look at it, check it out.
Great.
And Jenny, in our course, how do we address this topic of ordering in restaurants?
Yeah, we address it a lot, through cross-contamination discussions, how to eat out safely when you're on the gluten-free diet, and even in your own kitchen, potential threats in your own kitchen. So we do spend a lot of time talking about eating out. I actually had surveyed my community, and over 1,000 people in the gluten-free community filled out this survey, and I asked them their top challenges, and it was something, I forget the exact total, but it was in the 80, like 86% said that eating out was their top challenge. So we do spend a lot of time on that topic and how to do it as safely as possible.
Marvelous. And this is I'm so thrilled that we're launching the new year with this course, because this is so important. People are trying, they're really trying. And a paper that I'll have coming out being published pretty soon the title is The Enigma of the Gluten-Free Diet. And the word enigma means when something doesn't make sense. So people go gluten-free and they feel better right away. Most of the time they start losing weight, their headaches go away, their kids are doing better in school, the attention deficit's gone, their husband's joint pains are gone, but 8 months, a year later, they're not doing so well. And it's an enigma. Well, why is that? And it's because they don't know how to do a gluten-free diet correctly. Right. And so when I realized this pretty close to a year ago, we started looking for the right person to team up with. And we found Jenny, and Jenny is one of our CGPs, which is so wonderful. And she's got it down on how to do this. And so we've been working now for months and months on all the training videos, the education videos, on how to do gluten-free successfully. And so we'll be talking more about that. Next question that comes up is from Juan on Zoom. Could the puffiness of my under eyes be gluten related? Yes, they could be. That's one of the things that I deal with in my own life. My personal vulnerability is not to celiac disease, it's to some kidney dysfunction. And so for me, when I get a little puffiness under my eyes, Juan, it's because I've taxed my kidneys a little too much. But other sources of that puffiness under the eyes, a primary one is the food you eat, especially if it fluctuates quite a bit. If you find some days it's not so bad and other times it's really much more noticeable, it's likely what you've been eating. And one of the things about eating foods that your body doesn't like and your immune system, or you may like it, but your immune system doesn't like it, is that you hold more water to dilute the toxicity of this thing. And that's why people lose so much weight on a gluten-free diet, meaning so quickly. People will lose 5 pounds, 10 pounds in a month, maybe 10 to 15 pounds in 2 months if they had this extra. And they're not fasting, they're not counting calories, but they're losing this water retention, this puffiness that they had that was trying to dilute the toxicity of the food that they were eating. So that may be a case for you, Juan. That may be where it can be coming from, or it may be coming from something else. Jenny, anything you want to add to that?
I think you said it well, definitely.
Okay. Next one is from Amal on Zoom. Hello, Amal. So if a person has a green, all in control ranges, wheat Zoomer blood test, meaning he came back normal, and their allergy, sensitivity, and Zoomers show no reactivity to wheat or barley, is it safe for them to continue eating gluten if they switch to eating only certified organic wheat and barley? Thank you for this continuing education and teaching. It's terrific. Happy New Year. Thank you, Amal. And the answer to your question is on one condition, with one caveat. As long as the test is accurate. Now, the wheat Zoomer is extremely accurate test, as long as you have an immune system that is producing enough immunoglobulins. So the total immunoglobulin level, as long as those are in the normal range, total IgA, IgG, and IgM, if they're in the normal range and the test comes back normal, Mrs. Patient, you're one out of the, in my clinical experience, 20 to 30 people. About 1 out of 20 or 30 come back normal. Everybody else has a problem, but there's that person every once in a while, and you've got good total immunoglobulin levels, which means your immune system's working well right now. Because if you have deficient immunoglobulins, you can't check immunoglobulins to see if you have a problem with wheat. That won't work. But as long as you have total immunoglobulins that are normal, and it comes back normal, yes, you can do wheat, rye, and barley, but I'd recommend, Mrs. Patient, that you redo this test every year to 2 years. Because at some point, you're likely to cross the line of tolerance, because only 1 out of 20 or 1 out of 30 come back normal. It's not common at all that most of us have crossed the line of tolerance. Well, I don't feel bad when I eat wheat. Well, we're back to the 8-to-1 now. You know, if you want to use that logic to justify eating it and not checking, you can, you know, but it's not solid logic. But about to your question, that's the answer. If they have total immunoglobulin, yes, eating organic certified wheat, GMO free, is safe for them. Linda's on Zoom. Is it okay to eat sourdough bread? I've heard because of the fermentation, it makes the gluten less potent. Jenny, do you want to start with that one?
Sure. Well, with sourdough bread, the yeast and the fermentation will break down the gluten protein. So it is a more digestible piece of bread. But today, in today's methodology of making sourdough bread, you'd be real hard pressed to find bread that's been fermented enough that the gluten protein is gone. But more importantly, you know, I think Dr. Thomas covered this very much in a lot of his talks that, you know, a gluten sensitivity is really a wheat sensitivity. So you're still eating wheat at the end of the day, and you're probably reacting to various components of the wheat, not just the gluten protein. And I also think about how sourdough bread is made. You know, there's flour everywhere. There's even flour around the bread that wasn't baked. So there's a lot of opportunities to eat gluten, eat wheat that has not been fully fermented and broken down. So I say stay away from sourdough bread that is made from wheat. But there are some gluten-free sourdough options where you can either make your own with a sourdough starter, or there's some great companies out of San Francisco that make gluten-free sourdough bread with like brown rice flour and millet and gluten-free grains like that.
Thank you. I've only come across one study, and in my library, I would guess I have 8 on sourdough breads, wheat breads. One study came back where the sourdough process successfully broke down the toxic proteins of wheat, so they did not activate an immune response. One study. The others say it reduced the toxicity, but it does not eliminate it.
Right.
But one study said, yeah, it completely, no activation of the immune system, but it required 6 different types of yeast to break down in the fermentation process. And it was 6 different strains of Lactobacillus san franciscus. And when you did all 6 of them to make your sourdough bread, it worked completely. And I saw that and I said, wow, that's great. Hopefully some company is going to jump on this, but the process is so long and though that team of scientists have not published a new paper on that concept, I'm assuming they're still working on that concept. So I'm hopeful that one day there will be a sourdough bread. And there's lots of studies coming out about different hybrids of wheat that have less of the toxic gluten proteins. But it's really difficult because it's the gluten that makes it sticky and holds together. It doesn't break down. So that means it stretches. So you get lighter bread when it bakes. That's one of the reasons for using gluten. So you get the gluten out of there, and then you lose that ability for it to stretch and rise. So you get sinking breads and things like that. And Jenny's absolutely right. The proteins, the gluten proteins, are the main thing we all talk about, but it's the other components of wheat, the amylase trypsin inhibitors, the ATIs, that are much more dangerous than the gluten. And it only takes a nanogram. Amylase trypsin inhibitors are in the plant. Any bug that eats the plant, the amylase trypsin inhibitors poke holes in the guts of the bug and they die. That's the purpose of the amylase trypsin inhibitors. And they're much, much stronger in wheat than in any other food. And it takes a nanogram of ATI from wheat to activate your immune system trying to protect you. Just a nanogram. And a nanogram is a billionth of a gram. So even if you do sourdough with 6 strains of Lactobacillus san franciscus, you're still going to have the ATIs, the amylase trypsin inhibitors there. And no one's done a study to see if they are calmed down enough so that your immune system doesn't fight the ATIs. I've not seen a study like that yet. I'm hoping in the future we'll have one, but at this point we do not. Next question. Emily on Zoom says, have you ever thought about eating only eggs, meat, and cheese? Jenny, you want to?
Only eggs, meat, and cheese?
And cheese, right.
Well, I haven't thought about that, if that's the question. I think that really to be successful on the gluten-free diet, you want to eat a variety of foods. You want to eat a lot of anti-inflammatory foods, a lot of fruits and vegetables. And so, no, I don't think that would be wise to eat just, a very limited group of animal products. But that's more my opinion. You probably know more of the science behind it, Dr. Tom.
There is a version of the paleo diet that emphasizes this. And the only way that I'm comfortable with someone that I'm counseling to try a diet like that is that you do the testing first to look at all your micronutrients, to look at your B vitamin levels, your vitamin C, your vitamin K, your vitamin D, your vitamin E, the minerals. So you see, all right, this is my starting point. Oh, I didn't know I was low on this. Oh, I didn't know I was low on that. But this is your starting point. Then if you want to do this diet for a month, go ahead and do it, but then do the test again and see, because it doesn't matter how you feel in the long run. In the short run, it matters. You want to feel good. But in the long run, to stay healthy and be vibrant as you age, you don't want to be developing more deficiencies of the nutrients that your body needs. So you do a micronutrient test first. Ann will put the link in here to the micronutrient test from Vibrant. It's the best I've ever seen. But there are others out there too. So you do the micronutrient test first, then you try the diet that you want to for a period of time, at least a month, give it enough time, see how you feel. Say, oh, I feel great. Well, it may be because you stopped eating carbohydrates. And it may be that your body doesn't do well with carbohydrates and you do better with quality protein and fruits and vegetables. Well, I'm only doing the quality protein right now, part of it. But that's why you do the micronutrient test, because, wow, look at my B vitamins are in the toilet. Wow, my calcium's really low. Why? My magnesium's low. Wow, I feel great. But wow, look at this test. Is this accurate? I feel so good. It doesn't matter how you feel. In a sense, it does, of course, because you always want to feel better. But you have to have these biomarkers that you base your decisions on. So some people want to do the eggs, meat, and cheese diet, and they feel better on it for a while. It's mostly, I think, because they've gotten rid of all the carbohydrates. And so they were eating way too many carbs and just holding too much water because of that. But please do the micronutrient test first before you start a diet like that, and then do it a month down the road. Roger is on Zoom and he says, what is gluten and how is it defined to convince my doctor? How is it defined to convince my doctor? Okay. What is gluten? Jenny, do you want to start with that?
What is gluten? There was this funny Jimmy Kimmel, it's like a viral video going around where they ask people,
I saw that.
What's gluten, and no one could answer. But just
they said they went out in the street with the camera. Hi, do you eat gluten free? Yeah, I eat gluten free. Well, what is gluten? Well, it's not good for you. It's not good for you. They had no idea what it was. It was really funny, right?
But the basis of gluten is it's a protein found in wheat, rye, barley, and we say sometimes oats just through cross-contamination, which is a whole other discussion. But it's this sticky protein that when you put it in bread, it's what gives it that stretchiness, that glue, and I always like to tell people this when they think, what is gluten and why is it so important in baked goods is, you think about someone in an Italian restaurant throwing a piece of pizza dough up in the air. And when the pizza comes down and it lands in their hands, it doesn't break, it stretches, right? If you did that with a piece of gluten-free pizza dough, it would come down in a million pieces, right? So gluten really is that glue. Now, I'm not sure what Roger means in terms of convincing his doctor, though, but I think most doctors hopefully know what gluten is.
Actually, they don't.
Oh, okay.
No, they don't. Yeah. We come up against this often. So gluten is a family of proteins. Gluten is not bad for you. Bad gluten is bad for you because there's gluten in rice, there's gluten in corn, there's gluten in quinoa, there's gluten in other grains, but it's the gluten family in wheat, rye, and barley. Those three, and Jenny's absolutely right about the oats because fields of oats are usually in the same geographic area as fields of wheat, and some wheat kernels fly over and they grow up in the oats, and then they harvest the oats, and the oats are contaminated. But it's wheat, rye, and barley. Those three gluten proteins are toxic to humans. No human can digest them. It's too tough. They're intertwined together with these amino acids that lock them up, and the human digestive system cannot break them down. They just can't. And I talk about this a lot, and we talk about it in the course that Maureen Leonard is a famous gastroenterologist at Harvard, and she read somewhere over 60 different studies on this topic. And her summary was that all humans get leaky gut when they eat wheat. This occurs in all humans. You get inflammation in your gut and you get leaky gut. And leaky gut is the gateway into chronic inflammatory diseases. Remember, 14 of 15 causes of death are chronic inflammatory diseases. And leaky gut is the gateway in the development. That's why it doesn't matter if you got rheumatoid or MS, you have to look at the triggers of inflammation. And it starts with the leaky gut. And that's what we educate you on in the course. And about your doctor, it's extremely difficult. I won't say impossible, extremely difficult to convince your doctor of the science. If they don't know, a really honest guy would say, I've heard about this gluten thing, but I really don't know anything about it. If they tell you that, that's an honest guy. And that's someone you can say, okay, well, if I bring you some information, will you take a look at it? And you'll say, yeah. Then you come back and you do our course and you get all these studies to reference, and you can show them the study and say, this just makes sense. Can we test me, please? Just to see if my immune system is fighting wheat. That's the kicker. Doesn't matter how you feel. If your immune system is fighting wheat, you need to go completely gluten-free, not low gluten. There's no such thing as low gluten in terms of getting healthy. That's nonsense. There's just no such thing in the science. You get the tiniest little amount of gluten when you're sensitive to it, and you're going to have elevated antibodies for weeks, creating inflammation in your body, more inflammation from one little exposure. So this idea of low gluten or cheat days, you can't do cheat days. You sabotage yourself. And we talk all about that kind of thing. Okay. Let's see. The next question comes from Metap, M-E-H-T-A-P, Metap on YouTube. Hi, I have autoimmune hepatitis and I'm on a gluten-free diet for over a year. However, I do not see any difference on my illness and anxiety. Seeing functional doctor, not sure what I should do. Okay, congratulations on going gluten-free. The rule is test, don't guess. You have to test to see where's the problem. Where's the problem? I'm trying my best, Doc. I'm squeaky clean gluten-free. I'm doing my very best. And if you come to me and say that, the first thing I'm going to do is the wheat zoomer to identify if you're being successful or are there things that you're not aware of that you're being exposed to. That's the first thing I do. But then I would do some of the other zoomers depending on your diet. The egg zoomer, the dairy zoomer, the lectin zoomer. It just depends. So there's some other foods. Let's assume you're squeaky clean, you're doing great in avoiding wheat completely, no contamination issues, which is almost impossible. Let's assume you are. Then there's some other food that's also causing a problem. It's called cross-reactivity. And what that means is that if you have a sensitivity to dairy, and if in your vulnerability, dairy cross-reacts with gluten, you're completely gluten-free. But if you're eating dairy, you get more gluten antibodies. You get dairy antibodies and you get gluten, but I'm not eating any gluten, but it's a cross-reactivity that's occurring. And we explain that in detail during the course. So you have to, so first off, kudos to you. You've got a functional medicine doctor, and let's assume that they're competent and they've talked about some of these concepts with you, but you need to test. You need to test to see what are we missing so far. And here's an analogy. David Jones is the president emeritus of the Institute for Functional Medicine, my friend and my teacher. And David would tell the story year after year after year. He would tell the story. He goes in to see a patient and he pulls the file, looks at the file, then walks in the room and say, "Hi, Mrs. Smith. Nice to see you today. What's happening with those migraines?" And she says, "They're no better." And he says, he'll look in the file. "Are you doing this?" "Yes." "Are you doing this?" "Yes." "Any problems following this recommendation?" "No." "So you're doing everything I've recommended and you're not any better." And she says, "That's correct." He closes the file, says, "Would you excuse me a moment, please?" And he walks out of the room and closes the door. He takes a deep breath, walks back in, and says, "Hi, I'm Dr. His name's Jones. So he'll say, "I'm Dr. Smith. Dr. Jones asked me to come in and take a look to see what's going on because he doesn't have a clue what's wrong. Let's start from the beginning." And he goes back to the very beginning. "Tell me about your history. When did all of this start?" And because he missed something. So you want a doctor who will say with you, "You're doing this? Yes. You're doing this? Yes. You're doing," and you really are following to the best of your abilities. And if you make a mistake, you tell them, "I made this one mistake." You tell them. And if they don't know, the rule is test, don't guess. You have to find out, what are we missing? Similar to the last question, what are we missing here? Jenny, anything you want to add to that one?
Oh, no, that's good. I think
Okay.
you answered it.
Okay. Carol's on Facebook. Could tinnitus be related to wheat intolerance? Absolutely. The answer is yes. We actually published a paper. I published a paper with a group of otolaryngologists, ear, nose, and throat people, on reversing Meniere's disease and tinnitus on a gluten-free diet. We published that about 7 years ago. Christine's on Zoom. Is sprouted bread okay? Jenny, do you want to start with that one?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I know exactly how sprouted bread is made. I believe it's kernels are soaked or whatever. You're going to correct me on that one. But I will tell you, sprouted, I do get this question a lot, and sprouted bread is typically made with these gluten grains, with wheat, with barley, with rye. And yeah, I would not eat them. They are definitely, they definitely contain gluten. However, I do know that some brands, like I think the Ezekiel brand, makes a gluten-free bread that you can eat, a gluten-free sprouted bread, and it is made from gluten-free grains. So the long and short is you can eat sprouted grains or breads if they're made with gluten-free grains.
Agreed, fully agreed. And in terms of any wheat product, the only wheat product that I know is safe for a celiac or anyone with a wheat-related disorder is wheatgrass juice under one condition. It's about day 17 of when the wheatgrass sprouts are growing that the genes begin turning on to make protein inside the sprout. So if you harvest the wheat grass after day 17, you're going to have protein in there. You're going to have gluten proteins in there. It's not safe. But if you harvest the wheat grass sprouts around day 12, day 13, you should be safe. But most commercial companies that make wheatgrass juice, they grow it pretty tall because the taller it is, the more juice they make, the more profit they make. But if you're into wheatgrass, which could be a very healthy food for you, because full of enzymes and nutrients, it can be really great, but you have to harvest it and make your own juice. You have to harvest it before, to be safe, day 15 or so. That's the only wheat product that I know of that's safe, other than the sourdough with 6 strains of Lactobacillus san franciscus. That's the only other one I know is safe. When I asked my doctor for a test, he only ordered for IgA and it came out normal. Is that enough? No, it's not. You must include, the comprehensive tests are IgG, IgA, and IgM. IgA is historically the one that doctors will do to test for celiac disease. They do IgA of transglutaminase. And if they're a little more comprehensive, they do IgA for one of the proteins of gluten called gliadin. But that's only IgA. If you go to your doctor and you have a brain problem or a nervous system problem, he might give you something for it. You tried, it doesn't work. You go back, he gives you something else. You tried, it doesn't work. You go back again, he sends you to a neurologist. They give you something stronger. You feel a little bit better, but it makes you weird and you don't like it. And you still have your symptoms, but they're less. You go back, he gives you something else, it doesn't help. If you go back again, if you're lucky, the neurologist refers you to a tertiary neurology center. So that's a third set of doctors now you're seeing. And this is a research center. And these are the geek of geeks. Really hard to talk to sometimes because they're so in their heads in another world, but they know their neurology. This study was published from a tertiary neurology center. They said, when patients come to us and we can figure out what the cause of their problem is, about 5% of those people have a problem with wheat. The test comes back positive for wheat, and it was IgG tests that came back positive for wheat. But when we can't figure out what the problem is for these people that have been sent to us, 57% of them have elevated IgG antibodies to wheat. And we put them on a wheat-free diet, they get better. So that's from a tertiary neurology center for brain fog and seizures and schizophrenia and cognitive decline. that when they can't figure out what the problem is, they can't put a diagnosis to it, 57% of them get better on a gluten-free diet. So testing just IgA is not enough. Ann's on Facebook. She says, ATI, what is that? Amylase trypsin inhibitors. They're the part of the wheat plant that genetically developed to protect the plant from bugs. So a bug eats a wheat plant, it may kill the plant, but it gets the ATIs, which kill the bug. Eats holes in the gut of the bug. So it's a protective mechanism. Is that glyphosate? No, it's not glyphosate. It's actually a part of the plant. Ruthie's on Zoom. I'm gluten-free, but sometimes while eating out, I may eat gluten without knowing. How long does it take to get it out of my system? Somewhere between 2 to 4 months. 2 to 4 months of antibodies, wherever the weak link is in your chain. If it's your thyroid, you may have antibodies to your thyroid, go back up again. You know, when we have patients with autoimmune diseases, we do the tests, we identify what autoimmune disease they have. We find out they have a problem with gluten and probably some other things. And we get all that stuff out of their diet. We clean up the detox and we go back and check again. Now their antibodies to their thyroid are gone, or their antibodies to rheumatoid are in normal ranges now. They're not killing off their joints so much anymore. Then they say, I'm going to Europe and I want to eat the wheat in Europe. I'm told I can eat the wheat in Europe. And I say, well, you really can't. You definitely can't. And the reason that people can go to Europe and not feel bad when they eat wheat, and if they feel bad when they eat wheat here, it's because the part of the wheat plant that causes the bloating and the gas is mostly the FODMAPs, the carbohydrates in wheat. They cause the stomach pain, the bloating, the gas, and the proteins in wheat cause the immune system response, which is the systemic inflammation, maybe attacking your joints, maybe attacking your eyes, maybe attacking your brain, but not so much the bloating and the stomach pain. It's the FODMAPs in wheat that cause the bloating and stomach pain. And when people go to Europe, they eat the wheat and they don't get bloating and stomach pain. It's because the wheat in Europe is lower in FODMAPs, but you still have the proteins in wheat that activate your immune system. So I've had patients before, you know, we've done the retests on them, their rheumatoid antibodies are down normal range, or their Hashimoto's antibodies are down in normal range. Well, doc, we're going to Europe. Can I eat the wheat? Because I've heard it's okay. No, you can't. No, but I heard you feel fine over there. I said, well, listen, here it is. And I explain all this to them. And if you want to know, we just did the test that showed you don't have any elevated antibodies to your joints anymore. Your rheumatoid is in remission. That's great. Or your MS is in remission. That's great. So now go to Europe, do whatever you want. And when you come back, let's do the test again. And so they do, and they come back, and every single time the rheumatoid antibodies are back. They felt great eating the pasta and pizza over there. They were so happy and had a wonderful trip, and they come back just feeling great. But now, you know, they're a little stiff. Oh, the plane ride, doc, it's a plane ride. You know, I'm a little stiff. But then we do the test and their antibodies are sky high, attacking their joints again. The rheumatoid is back, or the Hashimoto's are back. That's the way you have to think about that. Jenny, anything you want to add to that one?
No, and I think that's really fascinating. I mean, I hear that all the time. And I do know that some of the wheat in Europe, you know, it's a lower gluten content, but it's still gluten at the end of the day. And it always makes me think of this lecture that I once heard Dr. William Davis give. He wrote Wheat Valley, and he had said, you know, like low tar cigarettes still contain, you know, tar, nicotine. It's just maybe a little less. Like you can't, you know, you're not quitting cigarettes by going on low tar cigarettes. So I always think of that analogy, and it helps.
That's a really good one. Marie's on Zoom. She says, if IgM, IgG, and IgA are not normal, do you not do the wheat zoomer test, as it will not give accurate results? Okay. If the IgM, IgG, or IgA, those are different types of antibodies, Army, Navy, Air Force. If they're elevated, yes, you can still do the test. It means your immune system's working more than adequately, is fighting to protect you from something. But if they're low, it means that your immune system is worn out and you can't use those markers to see if you have a problem with the food or not. Jill's on Facebook. How reliable is the ANA antibody lab test for indicating an autoimmune process? My wheat zoomer came back positive, but the ANA was normal per lab reference range. I'm still getting symptoms though, wheat-free, and avoiding other identified food interfaces. That's a really good question. ANA antibodies stand for anti-nuclear antibodies, meaning the immune system is attacking the nucleus in your cells. What cells? Any cell in your body. And every cell has nucleuses in them. Commonly, it's more your joints where those autoimmune conditions will happen. They did one study and they had 386 people that had elevated ANA antibodies, but no symptoms. They were fine. 3 years later, 87% of them had been diagnosed with an autoimmune disease. So they identified the ANA antibodies early, but then they just kept living their life the same way with elevated ANA antibodies. And then within 3 years, 87% were diagnosed with an autoimmune disease. So your question about how reliable is ANA antibody for indicating an autoimmune process, it's reliable to indicate you're on the spectrum. It doesn't indicate what tissue you've killed off so many cells that now you have a problem with the function of that tissue. And now you've got thyroid problems, or now you've got joint problems, or now you've got brain problems. ANA antibody testing, depending on the lab, is usually very accurate. And the problem is most doctors don't know how to interpret it. They don't know what it means. It means that your immune system is attacking the nucleus of your cells. So then the question is, why is my immune system attacking the nucleus of my cells? Well, what's in the nucleus of the cell? You have to remember your immune system is the armed forces in your body. It's there to protect you. Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, Coast Guard, IGA, IgG, IgE, IgM. They're just different branches of the armed forces to protect you. So the question is, what is your immune system trying to protect you from in the nucleus of your cells? Mercury goes into the nucleus of your cells. Organophosphates, different chemicals you're exposed to go into the nucleus of your cells. So there's some type of toxicity, most likely, deep in your cells that the immune system is going after that one. That's a primary reason why we get elevated ANA antibodies. So it's not going to identify the autoimmune disease. It identifies there's a mechanism and you're somewhere on the spectrum. And in the study that I referred to, it was caught early, but people didn't know how to interpret what it meant. And within 3 years, 87% of them had an autoimmune disease diagnosis. Next one. Jill says, all seems a bit overwhelming. Where do I start in cutting out gluten? Really, really good question. Jenny, how would you answer that? Do our course. Do the course.
We have a course. Dr. Tom and I have partnered on a course. You know, Dr. Tom has a ton of technical information and studies and research. It is a little overwhelming. And then you might feel like, well, how do I do this? This sounds great. How do I do this? And so we've put together this course where I give you a lot of the practical information about going gluten-free, you know, that day-to-day stuff, you know, how to order in a restaurant, what grains are gluten-free that you can eat, you know, how to even travel or go to, you know, a friend's wedding. What do you do when you need a special diet? So we're going to talk about some of those practical things. Right. And I know Dr. Tom talks a lot about some of the practical things on and his materials. And I know I have a ton of stuff on my website as well, where I, you know, just that day-to-day, those day-to-day things that happen that we need to know how to navigate.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. That's our job in this course, is to guide you so that you can do this successfully. You know, every time I sign a book, it's always the same. I sign the same thing. I ask the person their name, and then I write their name and I say, base hits win the ball game. You don't want home runs. It sounds like that doesn't make sense, but you don't want to try for home runs. Babe Ruth struck out more times than he hit home runs, right? But his teams didn't win the World Series, right? But he was a famous guy. But you want the base hits, the little things you do every day. And that's how you win the ball game. That's how you win the health game, if I can say it that way. And that's our job, is to teach you all the little base hits, all the little things, because it is overwhelming, Jill. You're absolutely right on that. Simone says, will you address lectins, please? Yeah, it's easy, Simone. Just do the lectin zoomer. When you do that blood test, it's very accurate. And if you have a problem with lectins, stop eating lectins. Lectins can be just as dangerous to you or more dangerous than gluten. Jenny, anything you want to add to that?
Oh, no, this is a little out of my expertise too. So thank you.
Okay. Yeah, and the lectin zoomer, we'll post the link for it. The lectin zoomer is an excellent test to do. Anonymous on Zoom says, I have MS. I was gluten-free for a few years and felt better. I need to go back on a gluten-free diet, but it's so expensive. Where do you find gluten-free foods at a reasonable price now? Gluten-free diets are not expensive. Gluten-free crap is expensive. That's the difference. And that's the danger of a gluten-free diet, is that people try to supplement, replace their bread with gluten-free bread, their pasta with gluten-free pasta, their muffins with gluten-free muffins. And it's just white garbage. You can't do that. Now, look, I'm going to eat gluten-free pasta once in a while. I'm half Italian, but I'm going to take my enzymes, and I don't eat it every day. Your diet should basically, there's some exceptions, but basically for most of us, mostly healthy organic fruits and vegetables, little bit of safe grains, and quality protein. Just really basic. And that's what we're going to show you. We're going to show you how to pick and choose doing this. Gluten-free diets are not expensive. My gosh. And that's just because we buy into all of the commercial gluten-free stuff out there. Jenny, is there anything you would add to that?
Well, I was going to say when I was first diagnosed with celiac disease, I really had to learn how to cook and how to, nourish my body and stop depending on, lean cuisines and things like that I used to eat for lunch. And so I actually find that in many cases, I'm saving money because I do prepare my meals ahead of time. And like you said, it's really not that expensive when you eat naturally gluten-free, and an egg is the same price if you're gluten-free or not, So really sticking to gluten-free, naturally gluten-free foods is the answer. But I do get it, because sometimes you go out to eat and you order a dish, the same dish that someone else in your party orders, but you're getting the gluten-free dish and it comes to you smaller and it costs $3 more, and I totally get it. So there really is a discrepancy in the price that it does cost more money. But you're right, like we do need to not eat a lot of that junk food, but if you do want to buy a package of Oreo cookies, it's going to be more expensive when it's gluten-free, for example, right? Yeah. So it's an excuse not to eat that stuff, like you can really nourish your body with healthy foods. But, I totally do get it that gluten-free foods are more expensive, likely because they can charge more and they don't make as much of it. So they don't get, they can't pass along the bulk savings to us, and they may have to use more expensive grains and ingredients to make it.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Let's see. Is there a blood test for leaky gut? Yes, it's the wheat zoomer. They put the wheat zoomer, they included the most comprehensive test I've ever seen for leaky gut in the wheat zoomer. So, and that was a strategic move to be more competitive, to have something at a great price that included leaky gut. Ruth on Facebook asks, can the inflammation from gluten sensitivity contribute to cancer formation? Yes, it can. It creates lots of inflammation throughout the body when you have crossed that line of tolerance. So it may feed more cancer formation. And there's a number of studies that talk. Some cancers appear to be lower on a gluten-free diet. Some cancers appear to be about the same, but certainly you want to reduce inflammation. And if you have crossed the line of tolerance and you eat wheat and it causes more inflammation, absolutely, that's going to contribute to your concerns about cancer. How about buckwheat? That's safe. Farro, no. Quinoa, yes. Farro is 3 different types of wheat. So no, you can't have farro. But buckwheat is supposed to be safe. Quinoa is supposed to be safe. But once again, they're grains that can easily be contaminated. And we talk all about that and why it's so important to take the digestive enzymes when you're eating grains in general, because of the amount of contamination that occurs in these grains. Nikki asks, could a wheat Zoomer test come back positive if you've been eating a ton of gluten in the time frame, like a food allergy test would when it tests positive for almonds because you're eating almonds all the time? Well, yeah, sure. People cross the line of tolerance for how much of something they can handle. Then your immune system gets activated trying to protect you. And that creates the systemic inflammation that is the mechanism of 14 of the top 15 causes of death. So the weak link in your chain is your kidneys. You have a little gluten once in a while, your kidneys are going to pay the price. The weak link in the chain is your brain. Here comes cognitive decline. It just depends on your genetics and the antecedents, how you lived your life, as to where those symptoms will manifest. Does barley malt contain gluten? Yes. Sandy asked, does it really take 6 months to get rid of the inflammation caused when you eat gluten? 6 months is pretty extended, usually somewhere between 2 to 4 months, depending on how sensitive your body is and how much your immune system's trying to protect you. But certainly a couple of months is common. 4 months is a little on the extreme. 6 months, I think, is, I've not seen much evidence for 6 months. Jenny, have you seen anything on that?
No, I haven't, but I do think like what you're saying too is a lot of that is internal, like you're having that reaction internal, but most people will feel better pretty soon after they eat gluten, and that's why it's important to really have a strong, healthy gut and to really, take these proactive measures to, create health in your life so that, if you do accidentally eat a piece of gluten, you can hopefully bounce back more quickly.
Right. How often do you recommend retesting the various Zoomers? Not sooner than 6 months. So depending on the dedication of the persons, 6 months would be the earliest, somewhere between 6 months and a year to retest. Anne asks, what tests now for cross-reactive? I did your Cyrex test for all this years ago. Yeah, great, Anne, so did I. And it was the best at the time, but technology improves. And the technology of the Zoomers is head and shoulders above anything that's out there now. It's just the very best. Just read the science. It's really, really clear, So the Zoomers are in a category all by themselves. It's like apples and oranges. They're very different. And the Zoomers are much more dependable when you do double blind. I challenge doctors all the time. When you're drawing a tube of blood from a patient, take 2 tubes out of the same blood draw. Label the second tube Joe Smith. Send it into the lab with your patient's blood, ordering the same test. And the doctor will have to pay for Joe Smith's test, right? You can't bill insurance or charge the patient. But then when the results come back, you see how accurate your lab is. Because one set of results says they're fine, the other one says there's a problem. You say, what? Which one do I talk to the patient about, right? And I had that happen a number of times. And with the Zoomer test, I did it with 3 patients, and it was always within 2 to 5%, which is a normal margin of variation. And after 3 patients, and they're about $400 or $500 each, I said, okay, I'm convinced now these guys are accurate. They're right on the money. But that's the way you know, and there's nothing like the Zoomers in terms of their accuracy. Can you please provide a link to the tinnitus and gluten diet study? Let's see, that was a few years ago. If you Google my name and Meniere's disease. Oh, you know where it is? ResearchGate. I put all of the studies that I've published on ResearchGate. So if you go to researchgate.com and then type in my name, it'll pop up for you there. Can you speak to tapioca? I had a lab that showed reaction to, yeah, a lot of people have a reaction to tapioca. A lot of people do, and that's because of the manufacturing process of some of our prepared foods and how they're using tapioca. Anything that your immune system is fighting, you can't take in because it's causing more inflammation, right? And when you do a test for 90 foods and it comes back and you're sensitive to 25 foods and you say, oh my God, that's everything I eat. Well, that's probably because of leaky gut and the whole mechanism of leaky gut. So you heal the gut, and you go back and do that test again in a few months. Now you're sensitive to 2 foods, maybe 3, not 25. But in the meantime, you need to avoid those foods as best you can and start the gut rehabilitation program. Well, we're 10 minutes over. I mean, it just goes so fast. It really goes so fast. Let's just take a minute. Jenny, if there's anything you'd like to say about the course.
Well,
people.
I'm really excited for the course to come out. I know it's coming out soon. And I've learned so much from working with Dr. Tom, and I'm excited to learn more from him and then also share what I've learned over the years. You know, I'm 10 years into this gluten-free diet, 10 years into celiac disease. And, I really think that I can help people navigate this disorder with a little bit more ease. I always say it's never easy, but it does get easier with time and with knowledge. And every day we're learning new things. So I hope you guys will take the course and learn from the both of us on how to do this.
Yes, I'm hoping by next week we'll have the link ready for everyone, starting off with the new year, so that we'll have the course ready for you by then.
It'll be ready in 3 days, everybody.
Go right. It'll be ready in 3 days. So
Okay.
look to our website, theDr.com, and we will send announcements out. By the way, for everyone who's here tonight, we have an SMS text thing that we'll send to you on Tuesday early afternoon. What's the Facebook Live going to be about tonight? And it's our way of letting everyone know of what's coming up later in the evening. If you'd like to be a part of that, just send the message. And how can they become a part of the SMS?
Go to theDr.com, and it's right on the first homepage. There's an option to opt in for SMS text messaging for live events.
Great. So scroll down on the first page and it'll be there, and we'll put the announcement for the course in 3 days there. Yeah. Look forward to start the new year right.
Yeah, everyone will start to get gluten education starting tomorrow at 8 a.m. And we'll be sending follow-up emails for the next 3 days leading to the course.
Great. All right, Jenny, thank you so much. That was a lot of fun. And
It's always fun. I learned some new things tonight too. It's amazing. Thank you.
I can't wait for the Lactobacillus San Franciscus with 6 strains because I love sourdough.
Yeah.
And I really miss sourdough. So I'm looking forward to that happening, hopefully sooner than later.